Hello everyone. So I want to do a quick little video on Kanna and its importance as a medicinal plant because many of you may be wondering why Kanna? Why extract the alkaloids out of Kanna? Well, these alkaloids could treat a variety of different mental illnesses or supplement different therapeutics for the treatment of those mental illnesses. And I want to go into the pharmacology and stuff behind these compounds to maybe give you a better idea of why it could be a viable therapeutic. Kanna is a native succulent to South Africa, and the indigenous peoples there used it as a mood enhancer and a natural antidepressant. But what's really interesting about this plant is that with applied science, it can be a natural therapeutic to treat anxiety, ADHD, and depression. So these compounds have been identified as the culprits to the therapeutic effects described in the last slide. Now, what's really interesting about the Kanna alkaloids is that they come from tyrosine and phenylalanine, which I'll go into the next slide, but they all have the same base skeletal structure here. And essentially, you have a bunch of different enzymes that come in and modify the functional groups, like the methoxys here. And essentially, from this skeletal structure, you can have many different ones, depending on what the oxidative states are of these different groups. I would like to go into the biosynthetic origin of these alkaloids. So just to give you the bigger picture of where they originate from within the plant, but all amino acids usually come from cellular respiration. And one thing I would like to point out is that most people think plants only photosynthesize. That is incorrect. Plants also perform cellular respiration to do work. They break down the sugars, respirate, and get that energy to make secondary metabolites, as shown here. But one thing to keep in mind is that amino acids originate from the cellular respiration, and the two that we're talking about is tyrosine and phenylalanine, because those are the two precursors to the Kanna alkaloids. Now, a very important key pathway to the aromatic alkaloids is the shikimate pathway. The shikimate pathway takes components from cellular respiration, and it goes through many modifications through enzymes, and then finally turns into your final aromatic amino acids. And then the plant takes those aromatic amino acids and further metabolizes them into alkaloids and other things that are common amongst many medicinal plants. But what's interesting about this is that these secondary metabolites, we're not really sure why the plant synthesizes these. We have a good idea. We're thinking that it's for self-defense against herbivores, but there's probably other reasons why it's synthesized that we're not completely sure about yet. So let's get into the pharmacology behind these enzymes. So the plants synthesize them through cellular respiration, the shikimate pathway, and some other modifications. Then a human or an indigenous person comes and takes this plant and cures it and uses it as medicine. Now, what is the important properties of these compounds that make it therapeutic? Well, the main alkaloids within the plant do a few different things. They act on the serotonin system, they act on the phosphodiesterase enzymes, and they also work on monoamine transporters. All of these systems play a major role in consciousness and mood, and I'm going to get into each one of these and explain it further, and how Kanna is related. So let's dive into serotonin. Serotonin is one of the key players in consciousness. It plays a major role in physiological and psychological processes within the body. One thing that's really interesting about serotonin is that it is the most primitive neurotransmitter, as in it was one of the first ones to originate. It is widespread across the entire animal kingdom, all the way from insects up to human beings. And one thing that we're focused on, at least, is the psychoactive effects of serotonin and modulators of serotonin. But most of your serotonergic drugs, whether it be antidepressants, psychedelics, anything that modulates serotonin, is going to change your consciousness in some shape or form. So one of the most interesting things I found about Kanna's alkaloids is that they work as serotonin reuptake inhibitors. Not only do they work as serotonin reuptake inhibitors, but they also may have agonistic activity on the serotonin receptors, particularly the 5-HT1A receptor, which plays a major role in mood. But what's really interesting about these two mechanisms of action, especially the serotonin reuptake inhibition activity, is that is the mechanism that your common pharmaceutical drug or pharmaceutical antidepressants work as. And let me tell you what reuptake means. So essentially you have your synaptic clefts and you have serotonin hanging out and it binds to the receptor and it causes a response. And then it unbinds and then your body has enzymes that come in after it has done its job, reuptake that serotonin, bring it back into the cell where it can either be recycled into something different or reused for later. Now, the theory behind people with depression is that they lack serotonin or normal levels of serotonin compared to somebody that is not depressed. And the psychology is very complex, so it's really interesting how serotonin plays a role, whether it be directly or indirectly, but this is the best science we have right now, and we think that if you modulate serotonin, you can decrease depressive symptoms because you're bringing more serotonin into the brain for longer, which gives that patient more mental energy to do the work that they need to do. Well, I read a research paper that the Kanna alkaloids actually have more efficacy on the SERT enzyme, the enzyme that comes and reuptakes serotonin. It has more efficacy on that enzyme than fluoxetine or Prozac. And this just goes to show that with the partial agonistic activity and the selective reuptake inhibition, this could be a very viable therapeutic, a very viable alternative to common pharmaceutical drugs that are on the market. Not only do Kanna alkaloids work on the serotonin system, but they also work on phosphodiesterase enzymes. And phosphodiesterase enzymes play a crucial role in cellular signaling by breaking down cyclic nucleotides such as cAMP and cGMP. Now we're really focused on cAMP signaling here because that is related to neurotransmission and stress responses. Now stress responses is regarding the threat pathway. And so essentially you have this subconscious instinct, and when it comes to social anxiety and social settings, stuff of that nature, you have this instinctual instinct to perceive a stranger as a threat. Well, what this enzyme does is it comes in and it breaks down cAMP, which increases that threat response. So what the alkaloids do is they can actually counter that by coming in and inhibiting the enzyme, the PDE4 enzyme that comes in and breaks down the cAMP. So when you inhibit the enzyme, you stop the breakdown of the cyclic nucleotides, which blocks the threat response. And this could have huge implication in people with very strong social anxiety, particularly people with autism, because a lot of people with this condition have basically an overloaded stress response when it comes to strangers, and they have extreme social anxiety. And so if you can modulate that threat response pathway, you could relieve the overwhelming social situations that some of these people experience. But that's just one example of many different examples of where social anxiety would play a role. So Kanna alkaloids not only work on the serotonin system, but they may have some affinity to dopamine transporters and noradrenaline transporters. So just as they work on the serotonin system by inhibiting the SERT enzyme or the reuptake of serotonin, they could also inhibit the reuptake of dopamine and norepinephrine. Now this interaction is weaker compared to the SERT within the literature. But what's really interesting about modulating dopamine and norepinephrine is you're mimicking a stimulant. And these two neurotransmitters are usually correlated with people with ADHD. And that's why all of your amphetamines on the pharmaceutical drug market, like Adderall and Vyvanse, Ritalin, these stimulants mimic dopamine or modulate dopamine and norepinephrine. And so not only do you have an antidepressant and anxiolytic, you also have a stimulant, which I think is really interesting. But not only does dopamine and norepinephrine play a role in ADHD, also plays a role in depression too. And that's why you'll see on the pharmaceutical drug market you'll have NDRIs and SNRIs, selective norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors, or serotonin norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors, and norepinephrine dopamine reuptake inhibitors. So the overall big picture here is that these alkaloids have a major role in mood elevation, and which could be applied to many different things. To summarize what we all talked about, Kanna alkaloids can work as an antidepressant, an anxiolytic or anti-anxiety, and a stimulant all at the same time. Now, these properties are very unique to these alkaloids, which could be used in conjunction with other therapeutics to treat a variety of mental illnesses, or it could be used by itself. More research would need to be done. However, finding a way to extract, isolate, and concentrate these alkaloids down into a viable therapeutic, a viable medicine that you can give down to the dose, just like a pharmaceutical drug, is the big picture of pharmacognosy here. And if you can, with research, if you can figure out the exact dosage in conjunction with other therapeutics or just by itself to treat certain mental illnesses, that's the ultimate goal with all this. But anyways, I hope y'all enjoyed this presentation. Y'all learned something today. If you liked it, hit the subscribe button, and I will see you in the next one.